Welcome to another episode of the Altitude Journal with your host, Dylan Ostendorf, and our guest, Rob Colter. How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about Stoics and how they were able to just live through daily life and how we can implement that in today's life, as I think it's pretty important in today's world. So let's get into it. How did the Stoics stay grounded when life was falling down?
There's a lot to say about that, right? So Stoic philosophy tells us that what's really important is how we how we understand ourselves and our relationship to the world. And a key point of that is to recognize what I'm responsible for and what I'm not. And Epictetus, famously in his work, The Enchiridion, starts off by telling us that some things are up to us and some things aren't. And in modern literature, this has been called, modern Stoic literature, this has been called the dichotomy of control. I'm not perfectly happy with that term for a variety of reasons we could talk about if you want. But what it does tell us is that there's some things I'm responsible for. And there's a bunch of things I'm not responsible for. And the things that I'm responsible for, he tells us, are my desires, my aversions, my impulses, and my judgments. And then he basically tells us that everything else I'm not responsible for. And I like to kind of boil that down for me into what I'm really responsible for is my choices. My choices about, in those cases, what I want, what I don't want, or what I want to avoid. The sort of choices about things I think I'm going to do, and the sort of things, the judgments, right, are my choices about what I'm going to believe. And those things are sort of fundamental. Keeping that straight are sort of fundamental to my staying grounded, as you put it. Everything else, though, for as Epictetus points out, is not up to me. I'm not responsible for it. So I might be responsible for the things. Well, I mean, if things are falling apart around me, I'm responsible for how I respond to that. Although even that I have to be a little bit careful about because. I'm not necessarily responsible for, other people's reactions to how I react.
Yeah.
Right? I'm responsible for the choices I make, right? I might, but I'm not always, I'm not really responsible in this strong sense for the results of my choices even.
Really?
Yeah. So, I may decide, for example, that I think something that's happening is unjust.
Yeah.
And then maybe I need to be responsible for choosing to try to do something about that. But I'm not always necessarily responsible for, I'm not responsible for whether or not that injustice gets solved.
Okay.
To use a bit more of a maybe mundane example, is let's say I want to get in better shape.
Okay.
I'm responsible for the choice to try to get in better shape, and that involves choices like I choose to go to the gym.
Yep. Go for a run or go biking. Yeah.
Yeah. Or change my diet or something like that. But I'm not responsible if I go to the gym and it's closed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm not responsible for the gyms being open when I feel like it. I'm not responsible if I'm trying to say eat better, but I happen to live in a place that doesn't have any grocery stores and I'm forced, to either go hungry or eat, microwave mac and cheese from the gas station or whatever, right? Yeah. Because that's the only thing that's available to me. I might want to eat better, but not be able to. Right? So the world works in ways such that my causal powers, just talk about it a little more technically, have limits.
Yeah. So would you say, like if you aren't well financially too, would that be something you're not responsible for, or would that be something you are?
Well, I'm not responsible for it like in the moment.
Okay.
So where I'm at is a result of a whole bunch of things. Among the things that it's a result of is my past choices, but also other stuff too, like my parents or my socioeconomic upbringing.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for all those things that happened in the past. I can't be, because it's not up to me anymore.
No, you can't control that.
Right. Nor can I control all the results that might come from my choices I make right now. But what I am responsible for is the choices I make right now. So if I'm not in a good financial position right now, that's not up to me, because it's a result of a whole bunch of other stuff that's not up to me.
Yeah, it's just that next step.
Well, and it's actually, it's not even the next step.
It's
the step right now.
currently, Yeah. So why did you decide to get into like philosophy, and especially like the Stoics?
Yeah. So, well, I'm a professor of philosophy.
Yep.
And ancient Greek and Roman philosophy is my academic specialty, and that includes the Stoics. And I taught the Stoics like Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, or even some of the earlier Stoics in their fragments for a long time, until I got to the point in my life where things weren't necessarily going that great. And I was teaching, and I realized I was actually teaching Epictetus, and I realized that this could actually be applied to my own life. And so I started thinking rather intensely about that. And the next semester I taught a course on Stoicism as a practical philosophy rather than just as a sort of academic curiosity.
Yeah, just thought-provoking.
Yeah. Or a historical thing worth studying.
No.
I started thinking about it, and I taught an upper level philosophy course for like senior philosophy majors and graduate students, and we explored what it might look like, and I looked at to sort of really live like a Stoic philosopher from antiquity. And I looked around on the internet to see if anybody was doing things like that. And that was about the time of things were starting with like Stoic Week. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Stoic Week that they started at the University of Exeter in the UK. I think the first one was 2012.
Okay.
And so this was about 2012, 2013 when I was thinking about it. So that was all brand new.
Yeah.
And so I had missed the first Stoic Week, but I took their exercises, and I said, I wonder what this would be like. And I played around with that in my own life a little bit, and taught this class. And then I decided to see if there was a way we could, if there was a way I could explore it more sort of thoroughly with other people, kind of like they were doing with Stoic Week, but a little bit different. And then I established, I believe the first year was 2013, Wyoming Stoic Camp, where we actually take 5 days and 4 nights, and we go up to a sort of a facility up in the snowy range of the Rocky Mountains, and we read Stoic philosophy, and talk about it, and engage in Stoic exercises, and then do a little bit of sort of sitting out in nature, trying to do that. And that's become a thing I do every year. People come to join it, everybody from students here at the University of Wyoming to students from other universities to, other people from all sorts of walks of life, including retirees and people from as far away as Europe. And so this has become a thing I do every year. And it's just sort of sort of snowballed into a big thing that not only I do as a practice in my own life, but I do a lot of things to share that with others in a variety of different ways.
Yeah. What do you think? So how do we like implement it in our own life? Just Stoic philosophy.
I mean, so Stoic philosophy, I think, is kind of a paradigm of something that scholars talk about and have been talking about for the last few decades as a philosophy as a way of life. And, this idea was brought up by this French scholar named Pierre Hadot, and his work started getting translated into English really in the 1980s and 1990s when I was a student and a graduate student. And the idea is that there's philosophy is kind of like an object of study, and then there's philosophy as like a lived way of life. How do we live philosophically? And with Stoicism in particular, but there are others that are like this, it's not really, to do it right, it's not really an add-on to whatever life you happen to be living.
Okay.
It's a way of reorienting yourself, and this kind of goes back to one of the things we were talking about a minute ago. It's a way of reorienting yourself to yourself and to the world.
So is it like changing your center, basically?
It's changing everything.
Okay.
I mean, this is something that I'm working on. I'm writing a book right now, but it's, I think, much more radical than people think. But really, there's a handful of ideas you have to get. One of this is this distinction between what's up to me and what's not. But the other is that they have a very specific conception of what it is to live a good life. And that good life, they say the goal of life is to live in agreement or live consistently with nature. Now, by nature, they don't just mean things like rocks and trees and bunnies and bears. They mean all of the universe, right? We have to live in agreement or consistently with the way the world works. And that includes the way I work as a biological creature with a certain kind of psychology and all of that.
So kind of adapting to your surroundings.
Not just adapting to your surroundings, but adapting to and accepting the way things are.
Okay.
Including the way I am. So that's one bit. And they say the only way to do that is to live virtuously. And so another Stoic doctrine that I think is important to recognize is to say, look, the virtue is the only thing that's good. So that's, if you really push on that, that's pretty radical.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that a lot of us, especially, in the relatively affluent Western world, think about as good, things like having a house, having enough money and stuff like that, they're going to say those aren't good. It's not that they aren't bad either. Right? This is important. They aren't bad either. What matters is how you use those things that you have or don't have. Again, back to what's up to me and what's not.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for the choices I make with respect to those things, and that's the only thing that can be good or bad. So you can be really wealthy and be an awful person. I don't know if there's any examples in popular culture today we could point to or not, but you can be really wealthy and be an awful person and have a miserable life, really. Right? You might be surrounded by luxury, but you might really be pretty miserable and not have, family that gives a damn about you or that you give a damn about. Always seeking the next big thing.
Yeah, kind of just greed taking over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a sort of cultural trope that goes back a long, long time. And but you can also be not wealthy at all and be a really good person and actually live a good life, live a happy life. And we look at things about what, and nobody's going to say that it's better to be poor than to be rich. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is whether you're rich or not, doesn't really matter to your happiness. The only thing that does is that you make good use of, with what's up to you, whatever you find yourself in, right? And so that means that virtue understood in this way, and people often talk about the four cardinal virtues of wisdom, justice, moderation, or self-control, or temperance. It's a hard one to pin. And what did I say? Wisdom, justice, self-control, and wisdom, justice, self-control, and why am I blanking out? Help me. Courage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Those are all really boiled down to forms of knowledge, forms of knowing what to do in certain situations with certain resources or a lack of certain resources. So really, what Stoicism incorporated into one's life is, I'm trying to kind of distill it all down, is like knowing what choices to make in any circumstance the universe brings to you. And so that's really all Stoicism is. But that's also like everything, right? I can boil it down into a slogan like, what's Stoicism all about? Well, it's knowing what to do and what not to do in whatever circumstances the universe brings to you.
Yeah.
So I've just said a sentence, right? But that also means it's everything.
Yeah. But do you ever know what the right choice? You never really know what the right choice is.
Sure you do. I know that it's not the right choice for me to punch you in the neck right now.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah.
I know lots of stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there aren't hard choices. And there may be choices that I get wrong. I'm going to get them wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not omniscient. I don't.
Yeah, that's human nature.
Yeah, that's right. Because that's the circumstance the universe has put me in.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of stuff I can just no. I know not to punch you in the neck right now.
Mm-hmm.
That would be wrong, unvirtuous, for lots of different reasons, maybe. But I don't, and I also know. I know a ton of other stuff about what to do and not to do with that, right? About the situation. Now, are there hard situations? Absolutely. Are there situations that I'm going to get wrong? Absolutely. Are there situations where maybe I wish I would be able to do better, but maybe for some reason I can't? Sure, right? Are there situations where maybe I have to make a decision quickly without gathering as much information as I otherwise would like to? Absolutely. But that's still compatible with wisdom, right? Is knowing, if I need to rescue a child out of a burning building and I don't know that much about the layout of the building or something like that, I may have to do something before I know everything, and I might screw it up and I might die. But, oh well, I mean, that can be the right choice in certain circumstances.
Yeah. My thought just left my head. I hate when that happens. Why did you start the Stoic camp?
Well, I just thought that at first it was kind of an experiment. I was like, could we do something like this? And I mentioned that according to the Stoics, the goal is to live in agreement with or consistently with nature. And here in Wyoming, nature is something we have a lot of.
Yeah, we have an abundance of that.
Yeah, so I thought maybe there would be a way to sort of immerse ourselves in this out in the woods somewhere and see if, I think, see what whether that would work. Now, it's also kind of related to my conviction that philosophy really is much more something that you do rather than something that you have. Or to put it another way, is philosophy is not so much a body of information as it is a set of skills and abilities that we can develop. And if it is a set of skills and abilities that we can develop, and just as a caveat, I think there is information. I think that information matters. But then it's also something that's best done together. And so bringing people together to try to build these skills and abilities and stuff like that in the Stoic context, in the context of a retreat where we could kind of get away from it all a little bit.
Yeah, get away from civilization.
Yeah, and focus a little bit.
Yeah.
It's turned out to be great. I mean, I do it every year after finals in the spring. And for me, it's a great time to just kind of decompress and refocus on some principles that help guide my life.
Yeah, like what you should do over the summer, like just things. Because, I mean, I don't know what professors do over the summer, but I'm assuming most of them have, like, projects that they do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Like, I mean, yours is the book. I don't know if you do anything other school-related things over the summer.
Yeah. You know, writing and researching.
Yeah.
Some years I'll teach a course in the summer. And
Okay.
you know, whatever it is, it's a great sort of recharge and reboot kind of time for me.
Yeah.
It's easy to let the practices that help ground you slip when things get busy.
Yeah.
I mean, this happens to everybody, as far as I can tell, anyway.
Yeah. I hear that.
Yeah.
What do you think the importance of meditating is?
Well, meditating can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. So I guess I don't want to say what it can mean for everybody, but in my experience, meditating in a Stoic style is about sort of or emphasizing, bringing to my attention certain fundamental aspects of, sometimes fundamental, sometimes not so fundamental, but certain things I want to incorporate into my way of living. So for me, I do sort of a meditating and journaling exercise.
Yeah.
And so unlike at least the way some people talk about like Buddhist-inspired mindfulness meditation where you're like empty your mind or something like that, for me it's really about more like focusing on an idea, something.
Okay. Kind of brainstorming.
Well, not brainstorming because that suggests to me something like disorderly, but
Okay.
More, focusing on a particular idea or sometimes a text or a sentence or a mantra, to borrow an Eastern term to bring in here, right? So it can even be something as simple as some things are up to us and some things are not up to us, or virtue is the only good. Those ideas, if I can sort of contemplate them and think about them a little bit, that's one thing. But another thing I do with my journaling is my usual practice is I will write down a passage from one of the Stoic texts. Then I'll reflect on it a little bit, which includes like, does it point out something I've not done as well as I wanted to? Does it point me forward in something I want to bring to my attention more often? Does it expose something that's been a gap in my way of living, or, it might do all sorts of things like that. It depends, right? And then I will write a reflection on that idea and how I might incorporate it better, or how I might remind myself in certain kind of situations, or whatever it happens to be. So for me, the meditation and journaling process is more, I guess I'd say, cognitive than like a mindfulness meditation tends to be. It's more active, but it's directed. So that's why I hesitate to say.
Directed.
Yeah, it's more directed in that way.
Yeah. I guess I've done a lot of meditating, but it's never been like actually directed. It's kind of just been kind of all over the place, just getting my thoughts on basically anything. and everything, whatever's happening in life at the time.
Yeah, for me, and I find it much more effective when it's directed in some way or other.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, whatever works, I guess.
Yeah, I
right?
guess. Yeah. One can choose what they want to do in life, I guess. Yeah. What do you think? So this is a thing I've been thinking about, is how much Christianity and philosophy kind of butt heads, which is kind of funny because I feel like some of the things, they kind of correlate, but also they just butt heads a lot.
So, I think, I think some of the greatest Western philosophers have been Christians. I also think that Christianity, I think there's really good evidence that Christianity in its earliest days was in fact building on philosophical ideas that were around in the time. So I think the idea that they butt heads is sometimes a caricature. I think, not all philosophers are atheists, for example, which is kind of a caricature, I think. So I guess I reject the premise of the question, but I actually think, there's really good historical evidence that the earliest Christians, the early church fathers, were in active discussion with Hellenistic philosophers like the Stoics, but others as well. And some of our best sources for early Stoicism are in early church fathers' writings, like even from Gregory of Nyssa or things like that. And there's really strong evidence that some of those guys were actually reading Epictetus. So now they don't agree about everything. It's not like they always agree.
Yeah.
But I do think at a practical level, a lot of what you find in certainly at least some strains of Christianity and what you find in, for example, Stoicism, do more or less agree. I mean, both of them, I think, have a real strong emphasis on service to others. That's nothing that they conflict over. Exactly why one would be motivated to do that might be different in the different systems, but the actual behavior need not be any different. That's and that's just one simple example, right? And the idea that meditation and things like that can be helpful to one's being a good person certainly agrees. The idea that we've been talking about, that some things are up to us and some things are not, that's found in Christianity and things as simple as the idea of God's will. God's will be done.
Trust in the Lord.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All that. That's like, look, the universe is going to do what the universe is going to do, and I'm responsible for my part. Right. That's all. Yeah. That much agrees. And of course, later on, you get things like the serenity prayer. Right. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. Yeah. That's a way of thinking about what's up to me and what's not, and what I'm responsible for and what I'm not. So I think there's a lot of places where they overlap, agree. There's historical influence, probably back and forth a little bit. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's been a thought in my mind because the class, every time I go into a discussion or any of those things, I feel like every time I'm like, well, as a Christian, I think this, and it's kind of opposite, at least in the course load. There has been a few times where it's been like, oh, yeah, it kind of correlates, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. And I think there are places where they can come apart, but, I mean, like I said, some of the most important philosophers in Western history are Christian saints, like St. Augustine or St. Aquinas, that are pretty much universally believed to be by philosophers, even atheistic ones, to be great philosophers.
Yeah.
So it's not an automatic thing. I mean, I do think, actually, I mentioned the French scholar Pierre Hadot, and he actually argues, in fact, that really the sort of conflicts we see are more of a result of divvying things up in a political way.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, so there was a time when, and the time was like much of what we might think of as the Middle Ages, right? From late antiquity to the 11th or 12th century CE, and churches and universities weren't different things. It was all like, that's where all the learning happened, was places like that. But it was by the time you get to early second millennium, 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, university and the church start to come apart. And they started each gaining more power politically and socially.
Yep.
And that where they come apart is really more about domains over which they have power, rather than maybe about truths or shared beliefs or something.
Yeah.
I mean, he spends hundreds of pages explaining what I just tried to do in 30 seconds, but yeah.
What's the importance of, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the importance of trying to just gain knowledge and wisdom, almost?
Well, it's absolutely crucial on the Stoic position, right? In fact, that's what is good. To not do that is, in fact, bad, like vicious. The only thing that matters is that I try to use knowledge and wisdom to live the best life I can in the circumstances in which the universe brings it, or, if one wants to use religious language, in accord with God's will. Right? That's the only thing that matters. So failing to do that is failing to be good. It's in fact being bad, right? Not pursuing knowledge and wisdom about everything is vicious. It's the only thing that's bad. It's the only thing you can do that's bad on their account. The only thing you can do to be good, the only thing good is virtue, and its opposite, vice, is bad. Everything else, they say, is indifferent. It doesn't really matter to whether you're living a good life or a bad life. It's all about knowing what to do and not to do in whatever circumstance the universe brings you. And its opposite, refusing to learn about that, or refusing to know, or acting out of ignorance.
Yeah, being stubborn.
For example. Yeah, that's precisely the worst thing you can do. And yeah, I mean, so there is nothing else of importance than knowledge and wisdom, understood in that way. Because, courage, justice, self-control are all forms of knowledge and wisdom.
So it all is like a pyramid, and wisdom's the bottom of it. Basically, it's the
base. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's the basis. It's the thing without which not, they might say. Knowledge and wisdom is the whole of virtue, and thus the only thing that matters.
So is that like the foundation of Stoicism then? Is just trying to be.
Yeah, I'm just worried about whether it's foundation is the right word or something. It's all of it, really. All these other things are just like more specific manifestations in particular circumstances.
Yeah, offshoots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I love philosophy. It's so much fun.
Me too.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk about Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. It was just his birthday last week.
Yeah. How did that go?
Yeah, good. I mean, I was doing another online event.
Yeah.
It went great.
Yeah.
As far as I could tell. Uh, I did my best to make my best choices in the circumstances that were going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about Marcus Aurelius,
Mm-hmm.
he, at least from my knowledge, he went through a lot of trials in his life. He
Sure.
lost a lot of kids. He lost,
Yeah.
I think, his wife, some other things. He was going through wars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How did he, as like a person, just remain calm? Like, that's the most difficult thing that I think I would have had.
I suspect he didn't always, right?
Yeah.
So his work, the Meditations, that we look at as one of the sort of big three, at least of later Roman Stoicism, is, I think, and his journaling and meditation. And we see a lot of evidence in there that he struggled. I mean, book 2, chapter 1, which is the thing I talked about the other day, he starts off, he says, remind yourself at the beginning of the day that you're going to meet with meddling, ungrateful, angry, miserable people. That's the first sentence of that book, which is really sort of the first philosophically substantive sentence of the whole work as we have it. And why would he say that? Well, because he was probably mad at some people, right? And yeah, I mean, he was arguably the most powerful man in the Western world. We know he had access to the best available medical care. Fewer than half of his 15 children made it to adulthood, but that wasn't unusual in those times, right? Childhood mortality rates were. I mean, it's really only been in the last century and a half where we expect all of our kids to grow up. Interesting historical bit. And yeah, I mean, so he was emperor of Rome during a variety of things. I mean, his was not maybe the most tumultuous reign, but there was threats of a civil war. He spent much of his time actually on campaign in, what's now Austria and in that area. So the majority of his reign, which lasted about 19 years, he wasn't even in Rome. There were always intrigues of some sort or other. And I think the way he got through it was the Meditations. It's him sitting down and writing out and reminding himself about the fundamental ethical and psychological precepts that he used to guide his life. And there's plenty of evidence that he was far from perfect at it. I think in just reading the Meditations, you can tell when he's having a bad day. A lot of the time.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can, and that's one of the things I love about this work is you see a guy who's also, tremendously well educated.
Yeah.
He was more or less, bred and educated to become emperor of Rome from a very, very young time in his life.
Yeah.
And he had all of the brightest minds in the Roman Empire at his beck and call, and he made use of them. So this wasn't a guy just doing random stuff. He had all the resources he could have, yet his life's still hard too. And he's still trying to work it out on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes he does a pretty good job, and sometimes he falls short. And that sounds awful familiar to me.
Yeah.
And so I really find him easy to relate to on that level, even though I obviously have nothing like.
Don't have to worry about running your own empire.
Yeah, right. I don't, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah. I think we all are.
Yeah, most of us anyway.
Yeah, especially dealing with that Senate that's known to assassinate a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, all sorts of stuff, yeah.
He's definitely influential, even though he himself did not know he would be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of passages there where he talks about everybody's going to forget about me. And
Mm-hmm.
on the
Yeah.
cosmic scale, I'm not really that important. And I do think it's kind of a little bit ironic or interesting that we're reading his stuff nearly 2 millennia later.
Exactly.
I think he would have been a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If he was in today's age, I think that would be interesting. If he like just all of a sudden just came back to life.
You would be very confused for a while, I think, especially by things like this.
He'd be like, "What is this?" Yeah. So actually, another thing that I was curious about is why did you start the Pathways for Prisons?
Well, Pathways from Prison, Wyoming Pathways from Prison is our prison education program here at the University of
Yeah.
Wyoming that I'm the director of. I did not start it.
Okay. Okay.
It was started a few years before I got involved by a colleague who's no longer at the university. And I got into it actually via Stoic philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the people involved very early on approached me and asked if there was a way to get some philosophy into this prison education program. They're doing kind of, volunteer-only enrichment courses, go into a prison, teach them about something, kind of thing. And I said, yeah, I've got an idea. And what I did is I took what I was doing at Stoic Camp,
Mm-hmm.
very practical orientation towards Stoic philosophy, and kind of revamped it for the particular context of taking it into a prison. And I did that. I basically did a 5-day intensive, hey, here's Stoic philosophy, here's some stuff, here's some texts, here's what it's about. Maybe let's try some exercises, see how that goes. So I did that. It took a little while to convince the prison administrations, like, why would we want them to do philosophy?
Yeah.
And I was like, just let me give it a go. So I did that pilot program, I think, I want to say 2015 or 2016. And it was really successful, and they found not only did the people who had been involved in that class gotten less trouble, but it also started rippling out into the rest of the population. And they had fewer incidents, at least for a while, at the prisons I taught at. And so I was like, I want to do some more of this. I've got some ideas for some other classes. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great, but you need to do Stoicism at all of the prisons in Wyoming before we even talk about that. So the next thing I knew, I was doing a version of practical Stoic philosophy in every prison in Wyoming, and we only have 5, but everything from the maximum security prison in Rawlins to the minimum
Mm-hmm.
security prisons, and it was really well received both by the students, the incarcerated students, and by the administrators there. And then, right, I think it was 2020, spring of 2020. My former colleague who started the program left the university, and it kind of more or less fell in my lap. If it was like, if we're going to keep this alive, somebody's got to do it. So I did, but then I was able to expand it. So now we're offering actually 4-year bachelor's degrees to incarcerated students in the Wyoming Department of Corrections. Yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah,
very encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a little over a year from now, our first cohort of women will be graduating, assuming they still pass all their classes. But their average GPA is something like 3.7.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're in prison, you don't really have. You have time.
You have time,
yeah.
and they're motivated, right?
Yeah.
They're really motivated. They are excited about it. They don't always love every single class or whatever.
Yeah. Who does? Really?
Exactly. But they're motivated to do well. A bunch of them still have 4.0s, and it's really fun to watch. So we have a cohort of women and then a cohort of men who are a year behind, and then we're hoping to keep growing and building on that. And I like to teach. I like to teach that population, And so they get a little philosophy, and it's a general studies degree, so they get a lot of everything, or as many things as I can get in there. It's pretty tough to like. Lab sciences are a little tricky. They don't want to give them a scalpel to dissect pigs. Nor do they want to give them chemicals they could make a bomb or something like that.
Especially in a prison.
Right. So, but we're trying to give them as much as we can.
Yeah. How many students do you guys have currently?
Well, we started with a cohort of 20 women, and that's there's been some attrition in that, some because some have been released, and also for other reasons. And we had a cohort of 20 men, and currently that's still at 20. So right now there's something like 32 total students.
Okay. Could you see this expanding to other states?
Well, other states are doing things, are doing other things. They have their own programs. And I just got back from a conference on correctional education and gave a talk about how we make use of technology to be able to offer a quality college education to incarcerated students. And it's happening. I believe every state now has a higher education in prison program. There are not very many offering 4-year bachelor's degrees, and there are definitely not many offering a bachelor's degree that's also available on campus. So they will graduate with University of Wyoming bachelor's degrees.
Yeah.
And that's super exciting, and we're kind of on the cutting edge, which is weird to say from Wyoming.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, but we'll be graduating with university bachelor's degrees. There's a few places that have done that, but we're one of the first state schools, public institutions that are doing that.
Yeah, I see a great importance in it, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, it gives them a way to be like, oh, okay, I got this. Now I finally got out of prison, and now it's like that almost quick line to a career. Almost.
Well, it's not just that. It is that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's still the case that a college degree earns you more money over your lifetime and opens up some career paths that are not available if you don't have one. But it's also the case that it turns out it lowers recidivism rates. People are much less likely to go back. If they have the more education they have, the less likely they are to go back to prison.
Yeah.
It saves money. It's cheaper than putting them back in prison.
That makes sense.
And it makes communities safer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, for some people are really excited about it because they have real empathy for a lot of the people in prison, and that's great. But I don't think you have to give a damn about the incarcerated population to see that the more education they get, 95% of people who are incarcerated are getting out. You want them to get out better.
Yeah, and then you have a safer environment.
Then you have a safer environment, right?
Yeah.
And you'll be better off, even if you don't care about them.
Yeah.
Your life will be better. The more education we give you'll pay less in recidivism costs. You'll have safer communities. These people will be better positioned to contribute to their communities.
Yeah.
And they might be your neighbor.
They could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up. Okay. What is the current project you're working on? I heard about that book.
Yeah. So I'm currently writing a book for Yale University Press. It's going to be called Why Stoicism Matters. Not as far along as I want to be, but that's part of the summer. I'm doing that. I'm also working on a number of other projects. Giving a talk at a conference in Spain I'm excited about this summer.
That'll be fun.
And
where should people go to hear more about you?
Well, I have a website you can get to at robcolter.com. I don't keep it as updated as I'd like to. You can also contact me at the University of Wyoming. I'm also head of the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, so I'm not hard to find.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think I could talk to you basically all day about anything on this planet, I feel like. But, yeah, sadly, we have to cut our time short. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for talking.
You bet.